They told me I was trespassing on public property. That was the excuse the HOA president gave the morning I found men in hard hats cutting down my apple trees and locking the gate to the community garden I had built and tended for 6 years. They waved papers in my face, shouting about new zoning codes and redevelopment. What they did not know, what they could not imagine, was that the same patch of soil they were tearing apart was sitting on a secret their own charter had tried to bury decades ago. My name is Nancy Cole. I am 57 years old, a retired environmental scientist, widow, gardener, and as of last year, the most hated woman in the Maple Hollow Homeowners Association. I hadn't meant to become anyone's villain. When my husband died, I just wanted something to care for, something living. The small barren field behind my townhouse seemed like a miracle waiting to happen. The land was part of the original dairy farm that had occupied the valley before Maple Hollow existed. D.O. Farmers' descendants donated it to the county on one condition, that it would always remain open green space. When the subdivision went up in the late 90s, the developers kept that promise by fencing off a third of the field and calling it a future park. For 15 years, the HOA ignored it. Then, in 2015, a few neighbors and I cleared weeds, built raised beds, and turned the place into a community garden. Flowers, tomatoes, herbs, whatever would grow, we planted it. We donated half the harvest to the food pantry and won a little eco-community award from the city. People loved it. Kids learned to compost there. Retirees taught pruning classes. We hosted potlucks, where everyone brought something grown on that soil. For years, not even the most nitpicking HOA board said a word against it. Then everything changed. In 2023, Richard Pratt moved in and ran for HOA president. He was in his mid-50s, perfectly polished hair, permanent smile, and a resume filled with consulting for real estate investments. From the first meeting, he talked about revitalizing underutilized spaces and finding new revenue streams. I knew those phrases from my own time in government contract work. They meant development, construction, profit. During his second month as president, he announced an ambitious plan at the clubhouse. Maple Hollow, he said, would build a wellness pavilion, tennis courts, a gym, and a juice bar. Investors were excited, he said, and it would elevate our community's profile. When I asked where he planned to put it, he clicked to the next slide of his presentation, a digital sketch showing my garden replaced by asphalt and a glass-sided building. Surely there are other sites, I said. That's conservation land. He tapped the screen with his manicured finger. The HOA holds jurisdiction. The board may repurpose common property for the greater good. Within a week, construction notice signs appeared. The gate was padlocked, and a laminated close to public access warning flapped in the wind. I still remember the way the sun fell across my garden beds that morning, highlighting the wilting leaves inside the fence. The development plan felt wrong down to my bones, so I started haunting the county archives. Decades of brittle paper, dust, and silence. I got lucky. One of the clerks recognized my name from an environmental impact study I had written years before and helped me locate the original deed, dated 1972, stamped with both state and federal seals. It clearly stated that the land was protected under the Agricultural Conservation and Small Watershed Program. That required a full environmental review before any building. The next HOA meeting was the first time in my life I saw Richard lose his smile. I walked up to the projector table, laid the copies down, and told him his plan violated federal law. He didn't even glance at the papers. The board has approved the project, Mrs. Cole, he said, motioning to security. If you disrupt again, we will have to remove you. Neighbors avoided my eyes as I was escorted outside. That night, as I watered the few plants I'd rescued, my neighbor Carla came over. She whispered like someone confessing a crime. Her husband, she said, had been working as a surveyor on a job just beyond the property line and found rusted metal barrels buried near the creek. They told him to leave them alone, she said, and not to mention it again. Barrels. My heart kicked hard. All chemical barrels were how half of my environmental cases had started. The next morning, I grabbed a trowel, an evidence jar, and followed the curve of the creek. The ground smelled faintly metallic, a scent I hadn't forgotten from years of fieldwork. I scooped a small sample and sealed it. An old colleague at the university lab ran a test. When he handed me the results, he just said, "You're going to have a storm on your hands." The soil contained benzene, formaldehyde, and traces of heavy metals industrial waste. The kind no one wanted to talk about. I mailed the results in deed copies to the State Environmental Quality Office and the County Health Department. Then I waited. The waiting ended fast. Within 10 days, unmarked government SUVs and reporters appeared at the closed garden. Investigators unearthed drum after corroded drum, each leaking toxic residue. The company name on the faded labels matched a chemical supplier that had gone bankrupt in the 80s. Polar Day. Everything lined up with old county projects that had vanished from the records right before Maple Hollow was built. Word spread like wildfire. Parents were terrified. The playground sat 100 feet from the creek. Some homes had shallow wells. Environmental inspectors ordered immediate soil testing on every property bordering the field. The HOA board panicked. Richard called an emergency meeting, barred cameras, and tried to pin the blame on me. Slee claimed I had trespassed, tampered with evidence, and exaggerated results. While he ranted, state officials were already raiding his office. They had traced a series of fraudulent grant applications submitted under the HOA's name applications he had filed using copied signatures of board members. He was angling to get federal cleanup money, then funnel it through companies owned by his associates. Every lie he told came apart. The county attorney charged him with mail fraud, false reporting, and reckless endangerment. News anchors camped outside the subdivision gates, calling the scandal toxins in the hollow. For months, our neighborhood was a construction zone again. But this time, it was a cleanup. Crews in protective suits dug out contaminated earth by the truckload. The state ordered new soil, new trees, and long-term water monitoring. It took nearly a year, but when the last orange barrels disappeared, the land was once again safe, truly safe. The county placed a permanent conservation easement on the field, removing it permanently from HOA jurisdiction. Days. They asked me to oversee the replanting effort. That spring, when the new topsoil arrived, dozens of volunteers showed up. Families, kids, even longtime skeptics. We planted sunflowers, tomatoes, and herbs under banners reading, "Maple Hollow Garden Reborn." At first, people looked uneasy, as if the ghosts of those buried barrels might still haunt the place. But slowly, laughter came back. By summer, we were hosting farmers' market Saturdays, selling produce whose profits went toward community repairs. Reporters called it a redemption story. I just called it justice sprouting from dirt. Sometimes a few of the old board members stop to apologize. I tell them there is no point in guilt as long as they learn to pay attention. Corruption lives on silence, the same way weeds thrive on neglect. You just have to get your hands dirty to pull it out. Now every morning I walk the rows of flowers and remember how it looked the day they chained that gate. I think about all the roots under my feet, some poisoned, some cleansed, some new. I think about how truth is like a seed. It might be buried for decades. It might sit in the dark where no one wants to see it, but eventually it pushes upward, cracks the concrete, and reaches the sun again. That is the story of Maple Hollow. A garden stolen, poisoned, and reclaimed. Proof that even when people misuse power, the ground itself remembers who cared for it first.